The main event starts.
All right, Black and White Sports supporters, let's talk about Caitlin Clark and Alyssa Thomas. Oh, man, the Phoenix Mercury put a post up about assist. You'll have to excuse everyone if we all mistakenly thought it said assaults.
That is how the conversation around women basketball completely shifted in a matter of months. When an official team account puts out a graphic celebrating a player leading the league in assists, and the immediate, overwhelming public response is to mistake the word assist for assault, you know the narrative has completely broken away from the basketball court. This is not just about a single statistical category or a standard regular season rivalry anymore. What we are witnessing is an unprecedented cultural and structural divide within the WNBA, where the fans, the legacy media, and the actual players on the floor are seeing two entirely different realities. But the part that should actually bother you comes later, when we look at how the players themselves voted behind closed doors, revealing an internal resentment that numbers alone cannot explain. To understand how we arrived at this boiling point, we have to look at the sudden emergence of independent sports commentary challenging the long-standing league narratives. Even legacy media figures who spent decades inside the traditional corporate sports environment are starting to look at the current state of the WNBA and ask the exact same questions that mainstream networks have spent all year trying to avoid.
All right. So, let's start with a ESPN legend. And look, I stopped really consuming ESPN many years ago, but there have been some personalities that have come through the network that are just legendary. Dan Patrick, Rich Eisen, Stuart Scott, Linda Cohn. All right. And she just recently, after 34 years of doing SportsCenter, retired.
When someone with that level of institutional credibility steps away from a major network after more than 3 decades, they gain a freedom that corporate broadcasting simply does not allow. For 34 years, Linda Cohn was a staple of standard sports journalism, watching the evolution of professional leagues, media rights deals, and athlete marketing from the center of the sports world. Her departure marks a massive shift because independent platforms allow veteran journalists to bypass the heavily sanitized, agenda-driven talking points that dominate morning sports television. The corporate media has spent the entire season attempting to frame every single physical altercation, controversial whistle, and hostile press conference as nothing more than standard competitive basketball. They want the public to believe that the friction surrounding the current rookie class is identical to the traditional growing pains experienced by every generation of incoming athletes. But when a journalist who has covered sports since 1992 decides to publicly question the official narrative, it indicates that the internal corporate consensus is beginning to crack under the weight of obvious double standards.
I mean, a sophomore in high school. That's wild. That's wild. So, she made some comments about Caitlin Clark and about Alyssa Thomas. And if you listen, this is the same thing I said the other day when Alyssa Thomas claimed that she was getting death threats and all this kind of thing.
This is where the official narrative begins to encounter serious public skepticism. Over the past several months, we have seen an increasing number of public statements regarding extreme online hostility, personal threats, and racial slurs directed at veteran players. These are incredibly serious allegations that involve criminal behavior, yet they are consistently presented to the public via casual post-game press conferences or emotional media availability sessions, rather than through formal legal channels. When a high-profile athlete claims that their safety and the safety of their family is being actively compromised by a massive wave of online coordinated harassment, the standard procedure for any public figure is an immediate escalation to corporate security and federal law enforcement. By asking the direct question of whether these incidents were actually reported to the proper authorities, veteran commentators are highlighting a bizarre disconnect. If these threats are as pervasive and dangerous as the league office and the player association claim, there should be an active, documented paper trail involving law enforcement agencies investigating these digital footprints.
Linda Cohn comes out and asks the question. You did turn that stuff over, right? Hey, we're right here. We're right here, Linda Cohn. We know exactly what you're thinking when you make a comment like that. Also, she talks about the fact that Caitlin Clark took the high road, but Caitlin Clark really and truly squashed the officiating in this league.
The contrast in how these public pressures are managed by individual athletes reveals a fascinating study in media strategy. On one side of the ledger, you have established veterans who frequently utilize their media availability to address the negative external elements of their newfound fame, focusing heavily on the cultural friction and the hostile commentary generated by the massive influx of new viewers. On the other side, you have a rookie who has faced an unprecedented level of physical scrutiny, hard fouls, and targeted defensive schemes since the very first week of the regular season, yet consistently refuses to adopt the language of victimization. When an athlete routinely takes the high road in public statements, it places the burden of accountability entirely on the institutions responsible for maintaining the integrity of the game. By declining to engage in the personal back and forth, the focus naturally shifts to how the league handles the actual product on the floor. The officiating in the WNBA has become a primary point of contention because the visible inconsistency on a nightly basis has allowed simple physical basketball to escalate into something far more volatile, creating an environment where players are forced to navigate unwritten rules that seem to change depending on who is holding the ball.
Ever notice when Caitlin Clark is the victim, she never plays the role of the victim? She spoke up publicly for the first time since Alyssa Thomas came out publicly and said she's been getting death threats to her and her family, and there has been racial slurs thrown at her. What I want to know, Alyssa Thomas, have you reported this to the police? Have you reported this to the FBI?
The demand for tangible evidence and institutional verification is a growing sentiment among the sports viewing public. When millions of viewers are tuning into a sport for the first time, they bring with them the expectations of mainstream sports coverage, where major claims are investigated, verified, and handled with legal transparency. If a story reaches a scale where it generates tens of millions of impressions globally, treating the underlying controversy as a mere talking point rather than a matter for formal investigation creates a vacuum of trust. Law enforcement agencies possess the precise digital forensics required to track down individual accounts making illegal threats, meaning that any public figure facing genuine danger has a direct path to resolution. When sports commentators push past the emotional rhetoric to demand the actual receipts, they are exposing the performative nature of modern sports grievances. This insistence on verification becomes even more critical when you analyze the structural decisions made by the league, particularly when it comes to celebrating individual achievements and allocating recognition during historic commercial seasons.
With Angel Reese, all these controversies. I love what Caitlin Clark said. I do love that she took the high road here, saying this cannot happen to any player in the league, no matter what the situation is, players, coaches, whatever. But she also took the time, which I loved, to basically told the league to be better communicating. She also mentioned the officiating very subtly.
The critique of the league's administrative and officiating standards is not just coming from frustrated fan bases on social media, it is being subtly signaled by the players who are driving the league's economic boom. When a player publicly calls for better communication and improved officiating, it highlights a structural failure that predates the current television contracts and sold-out arenas. The administrative infrastructure of the WNBA has historically operated under the radar, managing a niche sports product with minimal outside scrutiny for nearly 3 decades. The sudden explosion in global viewership has exposed the reality that the refereeing staff and league discipline officials are entirely unequipped to handle the high-stakes environment of modern professional sports. When referees fail to establish clear boundaries regarding physical play early in a contest, it creates a cascading effect where routine basketball plays degrade into hazardous situations. This lack of institutional control has fueled speculation that the league's administrative office is operating with an underlying agenda that prioritizes dramatic social media engagement and controversial talking points over the physical safety and fair treatment of its marquee talent.
This league is all about agenda.
Congratulations to Caitlin Clark. 3 straight years named and voted an All-Star Game starter. That's the great news. Second most votes by the fans for Caitlin Clark. The media, third most votes for Caitlin Clark by members of the media.
The statistical reality of the All-Star voting process lays bare the massive ideological divide between the general public, the sports media landscape, and the internal culture of the league. To be voted as an All-Star starter for multiple consecutive years based on a massive groundswell of fan support is a clear indicator of commercial viability and public resonance. The fan base is voting with their attention, their merchandise purchases, and their television viewership, signaling exactly who they want to see anchoring the future of the sport. Even the mainstream sports media, which frequently filters its coverage through various editorial lenses, could not ignore the sheer production numbers and historical context, voting the rookie sensation into the third highest position overall. This alignment between the fans who fund the league and the media that covers it should represent a consensus of excellence. However, the true anomaly appears when you look at how the peers within the league evaluated the exact same performance metrics, revealing a completely different standard of judgment.
What about other players in the WNBA? How do they feel about Caitlin Clark and how she is as a guard? Well, they ranked her 11th best among guards. Her numbers and all the other votes got her in as a starter despite that stupidity by many WNBA players who had a vote.
The decision by WNBA players to collectively rank the most statistically dominant rookie guard as the 11th best player at her position is one of the most glaring examples of professional bias in modern sports history. This ranking cannot be justified by any objective basketball metric, advanced analytics model, or film study. When an entire locker room culture collectively decides to minimize the impact of an individual who has fundamentally altered the financial trajectory of their entire industry, it transcends standard competitive jealousy. This behavior is a literal manifestation of biting the hand that feeds you. The current generation of veteran players is experiencing unprecedented financial growth, chartered flights, increased media exposure, and upgraded facilities entirely because of the massive audience drawn in by a single transformative prospect. To accept the structural benefits of this economic windfall while simultaneously using an official voting mechanism to diminish that same player's on-court achievements reveals an intense internal resentment that threatens the long-term stability of the league's player culture.
Unbelievable. Use your brains. Caitlin is putting up over 21 points a game so far this year, over 8 assists a game. Not many players rank in the top 5 with those kind of numbers, offensive production and playmaking ability.
The raw data completely obliterates the credibility of that player-voted ranking. Averaging over 21 points per game alongside more than 8 assists as a first-year guard is a statistical threshold that historically places an athlete in the upper echelon of the entire sport, regardless of era. To achieve those numbers while operating as the focal point of every opposing defensive game plan, facing constant double teams, full court pressure, and highly physical perimeter coverage is an extraordinary display of elite playmaking and offensive efficiency. There are very few players in the history of professional basketball who rank in the top 5 globally in both scoring production and assist generation simultaneously. These are the metrics of an absolute cornerstone franchise player, yet the internal hierarchy of the league continues to look for ways to minimize the accomplishment. This denial of statistical reality by the players themselves has created a deep sense of alienation among the core fan base, who look at the court and see an elite athlete performing at an historic level, while the veteran establishment acts as if she is merely a product of corporate marketing hype.
Interesting. You did turn those over to the FBI, right? And what are those players thinking? And is there agenda in the league? Ken Swift, at first glance, I thought this said assaults. My bad. That's good, Ken. All right. The Phoenix Mercury.
This brings the conversation directly back to the external commentary and the public reaction to specific player profiles. when an independent media voice points out that a legacy figure is cooking right out of the gates. It means the public is starving for an honest, unvarnished evaluation of the sport. The marketing departments of various franchises have tried to elevate specific veteran players by highlighting standard box score achievements, but the public reaction has shifted from passive acceptance to intense, detailed scrutiny of how those numbers are actually generated. When a team like the Phoenix Mercury attempts to shift the spotlight onto historical assist leaders within the veteran community, they are inadvertently opening the floodgates to an entirely different conversation regarding the physical style of play that has come to define the veteran guard play in this era. The internet does not forget, and the modern sports viewer has access to endless digital archives, allowing them to cross-reference a player's celebrated stats with their actual on-court conduct and history of flagrant fouls.
Dirty-ass team playing victims. She's played more games. That usually helps. I mean, seriously, keep trying, but no one apart from you clowns take her seriously. And assaults. Well, I guess if you injure the previous assist leader so she misses games, this is going to happen.
The flood of social media commentary responding to these promotional posts shows a complete rejection of the standard accolades. Fans are actively dissecting the footage, pointing out that many of these celebrated playmaking sequences are the result of basic dribble handoffs rather than elite court vision or complex half-court execution. More importantly, the public has begun to associate specific veteran stars with a hyper-aggressive, borderline unsportsmanlike style of play that has resulted in multiple high-profile injuries across the league. When an athlete earns a reputation for knocking out the competition rather than simply outplaying them, the value of their statistical achievements drops significantly in the eyes of the consuming public. The nickname transitions and online mockery are a direct reflection of a fan base that feels the league is protecting certain enforcers while leaving the actual box office attractions vulnerable to hazardous physical contact on a nightly basis.
Boy, I gotta tell you. Who is the league leader in hurting players? Alyssa Thug, aka AT, Caitlin, Brianna, Angel, Nafisia. Ford Nafisia Collier's still out right now. Still out. Now do turnovers.
The specific catalog of injuries linked to this hyper-physical style of play is exactly why the fan base has run completely out of patience. When you look down the list of the league's top stars who have missed critical games, suffered severe physical setbacks, or been subjected to blatant throat strikes and dangerous contact, a clear pattern emerges. The public is no longer willing to accept the excuse that this is just traditional, hard-nosed basketball from an earlier era. They see an officiating apparatus that routinely penalizes minor infractions while allowing flagrant, dangerous non-basketball acts to slide with simple, common foul designations. This double standard has created a toxic environment where the fans feel obligated to act as the primary whistleblowers, clipping up every missed call, every dirty play, and every hypocritical post-game comment to expose the internal reality of the league. The WNBA is at a massive crossroads where it must decide if it wants to protect the historic economic growth brought in by its elite technical players, or continue to coddle an outdated culture of physical intimidation that alienates the very audience paying for the tickets. With the historic divide between the fan voting, media appreciation, and the internal player rankings showing a massive cultural rift, who do you believe is actually responsible for the toxic environment currently surrounding the league? Is it the veteran players refusing to adapt to the new reality, or is it a complete failure of administrative officiating from the league office? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications for more honest sports analysis, and we will see you on the next breakdown.